In 2022, Republicans managed to flip 5 U.S. House districts in New York. The losses led Democratic leaders to invest heavily in the Empire State this past cycle. And with that work, the party was able to win back all but one of those seats. That's the one held by Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, who won re-election. He joins us now.
So, of course, Mike is here. We've asked him to come here. He is going to argue that Colgate should be in the top 12 in the college. Do you have a favorite college team, Congressman?
I went to Manhattan University. Unfortunately, we don't have a football team there. We do have a basketball team.
Yeah, the Jaspers.
The Jaspers up in the Bronx. You know, Brother Jasper created the 7th inning stretch at Yankee Stadium.
Really?
But
I did not know this.
Little known fact. I would say I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan.
Okay. I think maybe the Congressman and I should have a useless trivia podcast, because these are the things that matter to me. By the way, in Yankee Stadium this weekend, man, what a football game. Notre Dame against Army. That's going to be an exciting one. All right, so Congressman, let me ask you this. We've been asking Democrats over the past week and a half, what happened? Why did you lose? They have a lot of different theories. We wanted to get you on the show today to ask, your race was supposed to be very tight. People are now talking about you running possibly for governor of New York. What happened this year? A good friend of ours, John Avlon, ran a really great race. I thought I think it's New York won out at the end of the island. And he got beaten pretty handily just because it seemed the Democratic brand, even in New York State, has been damaged. What did you hear when you were knocking on doors?
Well, Joe and Mika, New York was interesting. Democrats banked their entire strategy on taking back the majority through New York and California, because over the last 2 cycles, Republicans flipped 10 seats, and that's what gave them the majority. And so Democrats figured if they went all in on New York and California, they'd get back to the majority. They spent $250 million in New York, and they were able to flip 3 seats, 2 of which were very tight. Mark Molinaro and Anthony D'Esposito ran great campaigns, but came up just short. But as you just pointed out on Long Island, Nick LaLota absolutely crushed John Avlon by double digits. So there was, and in my race, I beat Mondaire Jones by 7 points, or about 25,000 votes, in a district that has 85,000 more Democrats than Republicans.
Wow.
We saw Donald Trump make significant movement in New York. Nearly every county shifted rightward. In my home county of Rockland County, for instance, he improved by 14 points. He had election districts where he won 100% of the vote in the Orthodox Jewish community. So he made significant improvement. We saw that in the Bronx. We saw it in other parts of New York City. I think the problem in New York for Democrats is very simple. They control everything. They own it. We've seen a migrant crisis. We've seen a crime crisis. We've seen an affordability crisis. People cannot afford to live in New York. We lead the nation in out-migration for a reason. We have the highest tax burden. You see Wall Street and big banks leaving New York. They're going to Palm Beach. They're going to Salt Lake City. They're going to Dallas. It's a big problem in New York. And frankly, Kathy Hochul is one of the most incompetent governors in the country. And yes, they ran a better, more coordinated campaign than they did 2 years ago, certainly. But they spent $250 million, and in the process, lost the majority because they didn't pay attention to the other districts.
And for those that were wondering when the campaign for New York's governorship would begin, the official time, 7:48 and 32 seconds. Willie? Exactly.
Congressman, you walked into that one. Do you have your eye on that job down the road?
Look, we're going to look at it for sure. I think it's clear
I'm going to look at eating again sometime, but go ahead.
It's clear that one-party rule in New York hasn't worked, and there needs to be more balance and common sense. I've won 3 times now in 2-to-1 Democratic districts. This district that I just won re-election to, Joe Biden won by 10 points just 4 years ago. Donald Trump is going to come within half a point of winning the seat, of winning that district. So, there's definitely been a rightward shift in New York, and I think it really boils down to issues. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat doesn't really matter. Most people just want a good-paying job to provide for their families, a quality education for their children, access to housing and health care, and they want to live in safe neighborhoods. And here you have Kathy Hochul bringing back congestion pricing, which is nothing more than a scam. It's a commuter tax, 1 week after the election, charging the average New Yorker $2,500 just to commute to work. Meanwhile, providing illegal immigrants with billions of dollars worth of free housing, health care, clothing, education, and food. But yet charging the average New Yorker to commute to work. This is the stuff that drives people crazy in New York. And I do think there's an opportunity in 2026, and so we'll take a look at it.
Okay, that's an answer. Really quickly, it is one of the most fascinating insights I've seen on what's happened in New York and California, which of course Democrats rightly were thinking, given the past, hey, we're going to invest heavily here. They broke for Donald Trump. They broke for Republicans. And if you want to know why, you don't have to talk to, the New York Times or the New York Post editorial page. Listen to what Ezra Klein said in Pod Save America about people living in New York City and San Francisco and Los Angeles and the quality of life going down. And I thought Ezra really laid a lot of this stuff out to explain the more conservative break in those 2 states.
It's just not Rockland County, as the congressman mentioned. It's the Bronx, it's Queens, it's Brooklyn, where we saw some movement toward Donald Trump. Congressman, I want to ask you about some of the choices that President-elect Trump has made for some of these posts. You've been very critical in the past of Matt Gaetz, calling him a charlatan, saying he's not conservative. Do you think he has the qualifications and the character to be the Attorney General of the United States?
Hey, Willie, how about those Georgia Bulldogs?
I'm a Vandy guy, so can't help you there. What about Matt Gaetz?
No, look, I've been very clear about my thoughts on Matt Gaetz. I stand by everything I said about him. Fundamentally, obviously, the president has the right to nominate who he sees fit to serve in his cabinet, but that's why we have a Senate confirmation process. And Matt's going to have to answer a lot of questions about the allegations that have been leveled against him, including, obviously, the allegations that he had sex with underage women and paid for it. And that's something that I think is certainly fair game and needs to be addressed by him directly through any Senate confirmation process. I do believe the president deserves a swift and fair confirmation process of his nominees, and there should be up or down votes taken quickly because we have a lot of work to do. But at the end of the day, I believe it should follow the process. I don't believe we should be in recess to do this. I believe the Senate should move swiftly on these nominations, give them a fair hearing, but have an up or down vote. And again, I think Matt is going to have a challenge when he has to actually address the allegations that have been leveled against him.
You've worked alongside Matt Gaetz for some time. Do you believe he's qualified and has the character to be Attorney General?
No. I think, obviously, I think we've seen within the Department of Justice a weaponization. I do believe that the American people sent a very clear message on Election Day that they want government to work. And so you need somebody of the highest ethical standard there, and that's why the Senate will go through the process it will go through. And ultimately, I'm sure there will be a nominee confirmed that will do the job and do it well and clean up the mess at the Department of Justice.
Congressman, I just wanted to say congratulations on the baby. How are we doing? 2 weeks old now?
We just passed the 3-week mark. My wife and I planned this very well 8 days before the election. But baby Elizabeth Rose is doing well. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, very briefly, just on Bobby Kennedy, who, of course, was a New York resident of your state for a long time. What are your thoughts on him as in the healthcare position, running healthcare?
Look, he was actually a resident of my district, lived in Bedford. You know, there's many issues that I disagree with him about, including vaccines, as well as the shutting down of Indian Point. He led that effort and convinced his former brother-in-law, Andrew Cuomo, to shut down Indian Point. But I think he's also raised significant issues with respect to food in America, obesity, chronic illness. I think he certainly has more qualifications than Xavier Becerra, who's the current Secretary of Health and Human Services, who never had any qualification to be in that role. So, you know, look, again, this is why you have a Senate confirmation process. They will go through it. He will answer questions that I'm sure senators will have for him. But ultimately, I do believe President Trump has the right to nominate who he sees fit to help him. At the end of the day, it's going to be the president's direction, working with Congress, to enact the policies. And these cabinet secretaries, of course, serve at the pleasure of the president and do the work of the administration. I think many of these issues have been litigated through the course of the campaign, and Donald Trump won overwhelmingly, both in the popular vote and the Electoral College, and Republicans held majorities in both the House and the Senate, despite a map that is very tight and really did not lend itself to a large majority. So, you know, we're going to move forward. Obviously, the American people are focused on the issue of affordability, on the issue of the border crisis, on the international crises that we're dealing with, and I'm looking forward to hitting the ground running come January.
All right, Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, thank you so
Thank you so much.
So much.